Arrived at a potential bridge site, and we're going to go through and look at where we might want to put a potential bridge. So typically what happens is a community member or a community leader will have identified a location where they need a bridge. There's a river here, and this river floods, and they need access. But once we arrived here, we see that this isn't really necessarily a suitable location for a bridge. We have this very steep back slope. And we see that there's some erosion going on here too, so those are two things that would be a little bit troublesome initially, as well as there's not quite enough room in this more flat area here to put an abutment on. If we think about where the high water level is, we see that all throughout here, water comes up to this level pretty regularly, and we got some erosion going on, so we might want to set back more. But because of that, what we typically do is when we would arrive at a site like this, be like, okay, this is great, like there's potential here, but we want to start walking around. So what we'll do next is start walking up and down the river to look for a more suitable site for where we could place a suspended bridge.
So now that we've walked to a new potential site, we can see that we have nice flat areas on both sides of the river, but most likely not enough height for even with 3 tiers to get our abutments up and make freeboard over the high water line. As you can see, we're very close to the river, and it's running really low right now, and high water line would be probably where we're standing right now. We could potentially put an abutment up on the hill there, but on the other side of the river, there isn't really any space and too much slope for another abutment.
Let's go check it out. So sometimes when you're walking along roads that are cut in some of these types of canyons, the way that you cut a road, oftentimes the road cut ends up being the only suitable location on that side of the river for an abutment to go. So what you can actually do is build the bridge in the road, as long as you're able to work out an agreement with the community for the road to be impassable for a couple months or so during your construction time. But that's actually a strategy where you could find a suitable location, say like there's enough room right here that we could put an abutment in this road and then build the road going on top. It takes a little bit more design to make sure everything works that way, and it's not the best option, but it is a solution when you're in some tight locations like this. So we just walked down, and now we see that we're about equal height-wise to this other side there. And this is, I think, a suitable location for a center line, so let's probably go check it out on the other side and see what it looks like before we get going. So we just walked across. That previous shot was from the road right over there, and we now need to start thinking about where our edge of bank is going to be. So to make that determination, the topography here at this site is a little bit unusual in that we have where you see the trees right in front of us. That is about where the typical edge of bank is. That's where we see the first slope change before going to the river channel. Yet we then have a fairly steep incline here, back to where now we see, so that where I'm standing right now, and that then goes into a flatter area behind this next set of trees. And so you have to make a determination now about where about your abutment is going to go and where you're going to identify your edge of bank. So we could identify our edge of bank where it actually is down there, but I personally wouldn't want to excavate all this soil right here, especially with these rocks that I'm seeing. And instead, I think I would want to place my abutment, or call this my edge of bank, place my abutment going back this way a little bit. So that's, I think, what we're going to do for this site right now, and this survey is use this ridge right here as our edge of bank.
You can also note that we have some power lines overhead here. If you remember from the Bridge Builder Manual, there's associated setback with those power lines. So in theory, we probably wouldn't want to have our bridge built in this exact place, but for the purpose of this exercise, we're going to be surveying the area. And make sure that you would note that on your drawings where the location of those power lines are, because that could become very important. So as you've seen from the drawings, identifying high water line is really important. And a really important part of the surveying process. So outside of first asking the community members where the high water line is, it's important to use other context clues in collaboration with what they say to make an engineering decision about where the high water line is or could be. So some of the clues we look for are first looking at rocks, looking at vegetation. Bare rocks or cliff bands where you can see where waters come up to is an easy tell, but outside of that we can start looking at vegetation and trees. We can see that the vegetation doesn't start until maybe a meter or two up the bank. We can also look at the trees. We can look for debris caught in the trees, or even right behind Jay, we can look for a line of trash that accumulates over time at the high water line. Even during low water or outside the rainy season, water crossings can be tricky and plentiful, especially when surveying for a bridge. First things first, remember it's always better to cross in the slower moving, calmer water than try some gymnastic rock hops or crossing really fast moving water that can be really dangerous. Here Jay is using some tactics that would probably be pretty unsafe, and we'd refrain from using due to the chance of falling in and hurting yourself in the slippery rocks. First he tries the faster moving water and realizes that's a bad idea. So he comes over to the slower moving area. Here it's much calmer, but remember, crossing water that is over knee deep can be unsafe. Finds himself in a section here that's much deeper than his knees. Eventually finding a way below his knees that is safe to cross.